Hi, loves, and welcome back. Today's episode is close to my heart, and I've put a lot of care into it because I know how confusing this phase can feel. There's a difference between growth that's alive and growth that keeps us searching. Most people who are stuck are not resisting growth, they're actively seeking it. They're the people that are doing all the things to be the change they want to see in the world. They're the ones reading, listening, investing, uncovering layers. And that's what makes this phase so hard to recognize. Because when you're almost aligned, it feels like motion, but the ride keeps taking you to the wrong destination. Almost aligned is where things still work. The language fits. The insights land. The identity functions. I know this space intimately because I lived here for a long time while believing I was evolving. And being honest about it is where real growth actually happens. I was sincerely committed. I was showing up relentlessly. And I could not understand why I still felt like I was in pieces rather than embodying inner peace. Almost aligned is confusing as fuck because you're not stagnant. You're in motion. But the motion is circular. You're processing, reflecting, reframing, and somehow nothing is finishing. Here's the contradiction that almost aligned creates within oneself. I believed I was doing everything right. I believed I should feel different by now. And when I didn't, I assumed I needed more. More insight, more proximity, more guidance, more work. That belief kept me moving, but it also kept me from noticing that my authority was slowly shifting away from my own center. When something in me knew I wasn't home yet, I did what most thoughtful people do. I sought clarity. I found people who could name what I was feeling, who could see patterns I couldn't yet articulate, who mirrored me in ways that felt relieving. And it did help, at first. I felt understood, less alone, more self-trust and self-acceptance. I felt like the external proximity was aiding in keeping me whole internally. But over time, something shifted. I became fluent in understanding myself without becoming more rooted in myself. This is where proximity enters the room. Proximity feels like power. In fact, the phrase proximity is power is one that I used heavily and used to believe in myself. Being near people who speak your language, who recognize your experience, who reflect your effort, it can feel stabilizing. And sometimes it is. But proximity to people doesn't mean they know what's best for you better than you do. Being in proximity doesn't mean they can feel your timing. It doesn't mean they can sense what your system needs to release versus what it needs to protect. Even well-intentioned proximity can blur this. Because when others are constantly reflecting you, attuning to you, responding to you, your orientation quietly shifts outward. You start feeling yourself through the room instead of from yourself. And there's no blame here toward the people trying to help. But it isn't orienting when each individual is operating with limited access to their own signal. And that's all of us, by design. Most of what's determining our actions and choices is not conscious thought. Roughly 5% of our cognition is conscious. The rest is automatic, patterned, and subcortical. Our nervous systems are making decisions based on prediction, memory, survival efficiency, and prior conditioning. So when someone is reflecting you, taking you in, responding to you, they're not responding from full clarity. They're responding through their own filters, their own adaptations, their own unfinished integration, which means even sincere help can blur coherence instead of restoring it. And here's why. Because in atmospheres shaped by proximity, error gets personalized. When meaning is co-constructed, when insight is reflected back to us, misses don't register as information. They register as failure. We assume that if something was named, mirrored, or visible in the room, and we didn't catch it, the fault must be ours. So the nervous system doesn't respond with curiosity. It responds with correction. Self-judgment becomes the fastest way to restore orientation. Not because it's healthy, but because it creates a sense of control. If I'm wrong, if I'm behind, if I failed to see, then at least there's a cause I can locate. Because when others are near, reflecting us, responding to us, awareness feels shared. So when clarity doesn't land, we don't question the structure, we turn inward and punish ourselves. That's why self-judgment feels automatic. It's an attempt to regain footing when orientation lives outside of us. You're supported, but not returned. Witnessed, but not consolidated. False security arrives before your system has finished reorganizing. So you stay almost aligned, feeling like you've hit a plateau. Because from the inside, it doesn't feel like you're stuck. It feels like you're still trying. And this is the part that really messed with me, because I was doing the work. So when I stayed unsettled, I didn't question the dynamic. I questioned myself. Why am I still here? Why hasn't this landed? Why do I still feel disintegrated? So I tried harder. Another framework, another container, another voice. And each one helped a little. But none of them required me to stop seeking. None of them asked me to stand still without narration. None of them brought me closer to myself, even when I honestly believed otherwise. Almost aligned doesn't strip you of your authority. It disperses your authority across many different containers. You remain reflective, insightful, self-aware, but you don't actually evolve your core identity. The ego just adapts. You're never wrong, but you're never finished. And that's the cost most people can't explain. Because when identity stays intact, growth has to stay performative. So if you're listening and something feels annoyingly familiar, if you've been doing the work and you still feel like you're circling yourself, if you've been supported, witnessed, and validated, but nothing has actually settled, you are not doing anything wrong. You are in a phase where movement continues, but wholeness hasn't fully arrived yet. That phase is almost aligned, where growth soothes but doesn't resolve, where proximity feels powerful but blurs your inner authority, where motion replaces coherence. Real alignment interrupts the search. It gives you less room to explain and more room to breathe. It doesn't expand your identity. It consolidates it. You stop asking, am I doing this right? Should I feel different? What do they think? And you start observing. I'm here. I'm steady. I don't need to outsource this moment. That's the moment when the almost aligned ends. Almost aligned isn't failure. It's a stage, but it becomes a stall when movement replaces resolution and proximity replaces orientation. If what you're engaging with keeps you missing yourself instead of inhabiting yourself, it is not alignment. It is still a loop dressed in new wisdom. And the moment you stop seeking and let something actually rearrange you, quietly, without narration, many rooms that once felt safe will no longer recognize you. And that's not loss. That's alignment.